Welcome to this episode of Disrupt Education. I'm Peter Hostrasser. Thank you so much for being here. Got a wonderful guest today. She is a micro school expert and administrator, an education consultant, and a podcast host, which I love. Maureen O'Shaughnessy is here. Maureen, thank you so much for being here.
Hey, Peter. Thank you for inviting me. I'm thrilled to be here.
All right, so there were a few things in there, and we got to jump into micro schools because I'm not sure all my listeners actually understand exactly what that is. But tell us a little bit more about who you are and what you're doing right now.
Absolutely. I am passionate about educational change and had done master's work, doctoral dissertation on it back in the day, and have always tried to create pockets of change in any school I've been in. And most of the schools were international. I raised my daughters overseas, brought them back to the US for high school to have more options in English. And we tried 6 or 7 models and did not find the right fit for either daughter. So after graduating them, it's like, okay, what am I going to do if my girls, 100% of my children aren't making it? How many others need more options? And it was like, gulp, I guess I'll start my own small school and see if we can do things differently and be another option for kids. And here I am.
That's talk about like if I don't find something that works, well, I guess I'll just create it. So that's fantastic. We're going to dive into that a little bit later. But let's jump into your own education, the formal part of it all the way through your PhD, and how else have you learned? Walk us through what type of student Maureen was.
I was fierce. And thank goodness I had a second grade teacher like, oh my gosh, you're off the charts, because I was reading way ahead of grade level because I was keeping up with Big Brothers and their summer reading program. I was like, I'm not going to get left behind. So second grade was easy breezy. And she's like, you know what? I'm going to send you down to the resource room so you can help other kids learn to read. And it was like, changed everything. I could have been that rebel that was causing troubles and whatnot. And instead, I developed this empathy and this awareness like, oh, reading isn't super easy for everybody. And hey, I can give back. And that was so pivotal. And I was 8. So fierce all the way through. I 5th grade, I did 5th and 6th grade math and was super mad in middle school that they put me back in 6th grade because a lot of systems don't have the continuity where you can keep some child going on an accelerated or an individualized path. High school, the principal's like, yeah, we're not going to do a National Honor Society. It's like, oh, really? And I found a school counselor who said, of course we can do one. And boom, we did it. So I don't know, maybe it's just from keeping up with Big Brothers, but I'm like, if you tell me no, that's kind of like, okay, wait, how can I turn that into a yes?
I got to tell you, I wish I had more students like that. No. And then they're like, hold on, let me build this. That's pretty amazing. Was there besides the teacher who identified you like as a kind of a reader that's moving forward, were there any other like projects or pieces of your education in the system or outside the system in those formative years that really struck you, that was like, hey, you know what? I remember this, and this was another pivotal moment.
Yeah, there were like 3 or 4 other teachers. Middle school social studies was the last amazing social studies. We were the caste system in the Hindu culture and working our way through. I sat in a full yogi position for a whole film strip, and I couldn't unbend afterwards, but to move to the next caste level. And I remember how to say Niet and different things in Russian. It was so experiential that has been a part of what I've wanted to bring forward as an educator myself, because it stuck. And I was 12, 13, and it stuck. And asked me what I did in high school social studies. It's like I memorized stuff and passed tests, right. So high school Spanish, she's like, let's do this. And it was enthusiastic and fun. High school honors English. She's like, hey, we're going to the college library. I'm going to treat you like college students. And it was like, okay, she believes in us. Oh, I guess we'll figure out how to do APA citations and this and that because she thinks we can do it. And then I had an independent study. I worked in a special ed TA in a special ed classroom, and he's like, I'm going to give you some of my college textbooks and I'm going to give you some assignments. And so again, he believed in me, and I got to go a lot deeper than just helping kids out. I got to start educating myself on different topics. So teachers that make it experiential and believe in us are game changers. I'm sure, Peter, you as one of those educators knows that influence on kids.
Oh, 100%. Yes, I love like experiential project-based learning modules. It's difficult to do in the time frames that we have. in the traditional system, I should say. But we do them, and you're right. I think of my own experiences in high school and in middle school as well, even in elementary school. So I love those things. And you brought these things through with a family, and growing up or raising a family overseas. You must have seen some pretty interesting things, especially in all those different educational systems and parts. They didn't work, and then you created your own. Was there anything close? Was there something that was like, okay, this might work, or that was very interesting, or was it just all like, tell us a little bit about that?
I think the reason that my girls had success through middle school is overseas is communal. I'm in the hospital with this teacher because they're giving birth to their child in Ecuador and don't speak Spanish, and I'm translating. Somebody else is driving my kid to the emergency room because she went down the slide and fell off and there's a bone sticking out. It's like we care for each other, and it came through in the school too. A high school teacher said, yeah, I'll take your middle school kid into our scuba dive class if you'll help her with the extra pieces. It doesn't matter that she's younger. She's showing an interest. So communal and about the kids. And then they got back, and even though we tried IB and Catholic and all girls and homeschool and alternative school, they were just bigger. The piece that came the closest was alternative school because, again, relationships was super important.
One of the things I love about like hearing the communal and I community, bringing communities together, it's not like that in traditional education, especially here in the States. Well, let's unpack micro schools then. So you're like, you know what? I'm going to do this. First, if I can ask you, what do you define as a micro school? And is there just one definition of it? And what are some of the things that you're creating to help people actually build their own micro schools, and also with education evolution?
Yeah, so summer of 2020, early July, I was on Good Morning America for like just a snap of a section, and they asked that profound question, and my answer is less than profound. Micro school means small school. It's like, darn, I wanted to have something so much fancier. I wanted, after my school got started and it was having such great success, summer of 2019, it's like, I want to make a guidebook because others can do a school within a school. I had done that as a high school teacher in a large high school, or open a micro school. I'd done that in the Andes, and I'd helped in the Philippines. I was an elementary principal, but responsible for a micro school, preschool, and early grades out in the jungle where the kids couldn't commute that far. So this was my fourth time, but the first time I funded and started and did everything for the micro school. But I created a guidebook with my board chair. It was like, we have 2 months and it's summertime. Let's do this so others can figure out ways to break it into smaller, whether it's starting from scratch or a school within a school. Really, prior to that, I had been principal president of a large high school, 1,000 kids, not huge, but there's so many rules when you have 1,000 kids. So intentionally, we wanted to stay under 50 students, or after a while, we split into 2 campuses and said no more than 30 on each. And that's 6th through 12th grade, because the more students, the more rules, the more structures, the lack of flexibility. And who says that 7th grader can't do 2 years of math this year? Or that 12th grader can't hang out with 8th graders and do Dungeons and Dragons? Who says? So we wanted that small so that there was that. Or our kids today went to a field trip and explored careers that tie into scuba diving because one of our 11th graders is curious about that. So, hey, let's all go check it out. So small means we get to be nimble and kids get to be seen, heard, and valued. And that's how we all thrive.
I can't imagine. So you're in the Seattle area. What is scuba diving like there? That would be, I've done it in Maine. Just this is off topic, but yeah, right. But super interesting. I'm guessing. I'm curious about that. Now I want to come to the school. So then let's talk a little bit about what are some of the main questions that people bring to you about creating a micro school. My first question is, Okay, how do you get the credentials through a state or the lawmakers and all those things? Those are all the things that pile on to,
Mhm.
a traditional educator or a traditional parent, if you will, who's getting their kids through quote unquote a diploma, if you will. What are some of those things and some of the other blockers that aren't really blockers that you find out that people are thinking about, but this is maybe a couple of ways to do it?
Absolutely. So sometimes people just work through a homeschool organization and maybe even have like a co-op where kids can go and do some cool things for part of the day. And then the school district has its own policy about homeschooling and how you work through that. Others, like ours, we just looked at what does Washington State require for private schools. So it meant the fire inspector to come, the health inspector, the number of classroom instructional minutes, the type of facility, the right kind of insurance. So all of those pieces, private school laws in Washington State, you don't have to be a certified teacher. You don't have to do the state testing. So it was, what are the things on the private school list? We check them off. And then we are on the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction and the State Board of Education's private school list. So it's really just looking to see what your state expects. Some places, charter schools are really easy to create. And it depends on, I kind of outlined some of the pieces in my book. What's your mission? Who's on your team? Are you trying to be a German immersion school? Are you trying to be ungraded and expedition based? So it really depends on what you're trying to do. I think you always want to know the law. Definitely. You always want to have insurance. So you've got to have the business smarts. And that's a tricky part because a lot of the people that talk to me are brilliant educators that have the cool ideas of what they want to do with the kids. But I encourage them in my book and my conversations, have a partner that's business related, that does the marketing, does the legalities, does those other parts that are super important, but aren't the source of joy for most of us as educators.
Tell us a little bit about where do you how long have you been since you said there's a time frame in there. How long has your school been open, the two?
Yeah, I got my daughters through high school. One of them just into a dual college. She's like, I'm done. Just put
Yeah.
me in college to finish up my high school credits. And that was spring of 2013. So then
Okay.
fall of 2013, I opened my micro school.
Okay, so yeah, tell us a little bit about like the pathways these students are taking. Like, I'm sure you're in touch with them, and where are they going after the micro school?
It's awesome. They're going so many places and they don't have this sense of, if I don't go to a 4-year school, there's a stigma. And in some of the private schools I've been in, there is, and to the point where kids and families will lie. And what you don't hear in the student profiles or school profiles where it says 100% of our students have been accepted and will attend a 4-year university is you don't hear the statistics about how many kids stay in a 4-year, how many graduate. It's just like we did great, done, and not okay. So we have kids in 2-year colleges, 4-year colleges, state, national. We have kids on vocational, kids that are taking a break and just working. It's all great. And we try to have them have some experiences in high school to figure that out. And this year we've added in internships and passion projects. Each year we try to add more that gives students agency and a chance to explore, and what are my strengths? What are my passions? So we want to help them. And because we're small, we're almost an extended family. Parents see us as team, team Jacob, team Izzy. And so, like, I know one student, our assistant, went with the student who was just petrified. We're just going to go and register you at this community college. And she's like, I don't know, maybe I want this one. I don't, just anxiety was debilitating. Got her registered. And last spring, she's like, hey, I was on honor roll all 2 years and I have my AA and I'm off to a 4-year college. Boom. So yeah, we love that kids take a lot of different paths and we can cheer them on and be a supporter for that.
Yeah, the flexibility is something that is super exciting. For myself, I'm looking over 150 students for my one, job. So that's pretty amazing. I like the flexibility of that. As I got to ask, so has that changed anything? How have you had to do any, like, obviously you're flexible. Has it changed anything? What does it look like in the pandemic world?
Yeah. So we haven't done our camping trip the last 2 years. We've done hybrid. We've spread kids out and had alternating days. We've been outside in the parking lot until, fires, the quality of air wasn't good enough a year ago. I think two changes last year. One is kids got to see us living the design thinking that we have them do with their projects. We're going to try it and then we're going to gather data and then we're going to have an iteration. And they saw us living that. And our teachers had to say, I may not get the projects I wanted done or to the depth I wanted because it's got to be kids first. It's got to be connections first. And even though our kids already have a lot of agency, our teachers have really cool projects that they get invested in and want to really make happen. And it was like, going to slow it down, going to go deeper, going to read the room even more closely and through the Zoom cameras if needed, and really figure out what's going on. So that was last year. And then this fall, I'm sure you've seen it. It's happening nationally. Our teachers, I was at a conference last week for school heads, and the presenter from Philly showed us an article in September. It says, it's September and our teachers feel like end of the year exhaustion has set in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes,
there's
totally agree.
no stamina.
Hmm.
Seattle Public Schools, the day after Veterans Day, had to shut down and take an extra day off because they didn't have enough subs for all the teachers
Hmm.
that needed time off.
Yeah.
Um, Even in our school, attendance, missing work has been higher in the first quarter of the year than in any full year. We just had one of our 10 full-time teachers leave, move to Canada because we can't get our visa act together in the US,
Yeah, right.
and replaced her with 3 teachers just to give us some bandwidth. So everybody is tired and everybody is lacking bandwidth and stamina, and we aren't exempt.
It is. It's obviously worldwide. It's a difficult profession in its own right. However, I think you're. Well, I know you're on to something very cool. I think how has like the micro school movement been? Because I think there's a lot of people looking for something different now. What does that look like to you? And obviously you've already kind of stated you have the book. There's a master class that people can jump into. We'll get that in a minute. But yeah, is this a growing trend? Because I know homeschooling has been growing for a while. I don't know if that. I mean, I think it fits into it. This is
Mhm.
new and very
Options,
interesting to me. Yeah,
options.
options.
Yeah, yeah. I think that people really jumped in pandemic pods. Let's do this. I don't know, like all small businesses, getting it from idea to actuality is hard, and then keeping it afloat for the first 5 years, super hard. I don't think a lot of people have that business owner mentality and that stamina because it is a business and it takes all of that marketing, it takes all of those pieces of the puzzle, all of the PR, all of the customer service. And so I don't see a lot of people really, they're like, oh, this is hard, or wait, who does the funding? It's like, I moonlit at a community college and didn't get paid for the first 3 years at Lead Prep. If you don't have an outside funding source, you have to figure out how you're going to make it happen. And it's like, oh, well, wait, who's going to pay my benefits? It's like, yeah, these are really good questions. So where I see it being successful is when people do schools within schools, or near us, the Lake Washington School District has choice schools. So they have an environmental school that shares a bigger campus. They have a hands-on school that shares the alternative school campus, choice schools, and a lottery system and a waiting list out the door for each of those, which would make me think they would want to add more, since there's a demand and parents would be demanding more. I think it's easier to go within an existing system or to partner with somebody than to go it alone. But I don't see a huge growth because it's starting a business and that's never easy, and it's not easier in the middle of a pandemic.
I do like that choice school within a school. We've seen
Mhm.
those models. Talked to several people on the podcast around that. Um, so, all right. Well, I'm going to just make you the educational coordinator of the United States. So you get to decide what you would change immediately. Obviously, it's hard to change everything, at
Mhm.
once. But and working within a system, what would be one or two major things that you would change to improve the education system for more people, hopefully all.
You know what? I think I would. I haven't ever said this comment before, it just came to me. I think I would tax every single business out there in the whole United States, nonprofit, profit, and that would be a tax on social capital. So I want every single community group, nonprofit, for profit, and depending on their size and the number of people, I want everyone committing to mentoring, to being involved in schools, to paying, not paying money, but paying human resources. Way back, yikes, pre 2000, Intel paid people. We had people in our high school.
Mm-hmm.
They were paid to come in, use their smarts, help us out, enrich learning. It's like, yes, could we have gazillion Intel saying, we're in this together, we're in your school, your kids are in our business, we're creating evening mentors, weekends, we're paid mentorships. I would say it's a mandate that we all care about our students, and don't say, teachers, get them world ready, life ready, get everything set in your 6-hour day. No.
I absolutely love that. I'm a business teacher, so I'm like, yep, let's do that. Because you're right. I mean, that would actually, I mean, as I'm thinking, hearing you say that, there is that gap of, people coming out with skill sets and understanding their strengths. And when I mean coming out with the diploma, and then, now we don't know, they're coming out of colleges and they're like, well, okay, I got the degree, but that was way back, way before the 2000s, right? So yeah, I love that idea. You just came up with that, like right there?
Well, I've always been more for community, but I think it'd make an official tax like any other revenue. It's a revenue, it's a resource. And we all know your experiences, my experiences, some of the richest learning was not within the four walls and had nothing to do with the textbook. So what if you have those kids in oh my gosh, I need to learn this because I could do that here, and then because business people would, and corporations and nonprofits and community groups would be so involved in schools, are like, hey, why don't you use our space, or how about we do this, or how about we reconfigure, and we don't assume that the model that works 100 years ago is going to work, because we're invested, we're seeing it, we have ideas, we have a reason to pull together and make it something that's relevant and ready, 2021 worthy.
That was so eloquently put, but it makes sense, right? It makes so much sense. It's almost incredibly, and it makes sense. So, I want to ask you a final question before we get your connections and where people can find out more about you and connect. And if somebody, and you kind of answered this already, but if somebody is looking for creating that micro school or a school within a school, what are some of the first steps that they can do? Obviously, besides reading your book, and connecting with you, but what are the things that you would recommend they do to get started?
It's right there in my book. Get a tribe. It's so much better doing stuff together. And then you can share. You don't have to be the business person and the education person and the facilities person. Get some like-minded people that value the idea of an educational option, whatever that is, that aligns with your mission, and then work together. It's so much more enjoyable to laugh and cry and create together. So that would be one. And think strategic, think collaborative. So many people go it alone, crash and burn, done. What if you're working together with the YMCA, or you go to your local chamber of commerce? What's a huge issue? How can we work together to solve this? So think about different strategic partnerships, because we need to be blending resources and breaking down silos and getting outside the box until we have a gazillion educational options and every kid is getting served and there's equity and everybody is future ready and contributing. And so there's plenty to go around. So collaborate and make that happen.
I started Disrupt Education thinking I was going to be the only one that changed the world. So I'm saying yes. Well, that was way back. So now I am in many different tribes and such. So yes, so much truth to that statement. I wanted to leave you a moment here to tell people, how can people get started with you? How can they connect with you? Where can they find the book? Where can they find the masterclass? Connect some people up, Marie. How can people connect?
I would say go to educationevolution.org. And right there, there's a place where you can do a 15-minute chat with me. There's resources. I'm a part of a collective of volunteers, mainly that I've met through my podcast that at Active. And so there's resources there. There's a microschool coalition. My book is on Amazon and different places. It's just creating microschools for colorful mismatched kids. And it starts out with, I think the most important part is addressing our rainbow of learners, because I think we think that they're all, oh, if they have been alive this long, then they go in this little box and we call them a 10th grader. It's like, no, this kid is gifted. This kid is gender fluid and doesn't feel understood. This kid has autism. This kid has ACEs. This kid is a hands-on learner. So it's just saying, hey, we don't have to pretend like they're all identical widgets that are interchangeable. So from there, then we're like, well, why would we want one school system for all of these rainbows? And then it goes from there. But I think we really need to acknowledge that, because we're doing our kids a disservice. They feel like I am the exception and everybody else fits this model, and they don't realize how many other kids are saying the same thing. And then social media is saying, and you should look like this and you should have this many likes. It's super duper hard to be a kid. Let's lighten up and say, of course you should not be this clone, and let's honor who you are and how you learn.
Well, Maureen, thank you so much for sharing your ideas, your thoughts, and your micro school expertise. What's the podcast that people can listen to?
Education Evolution, and it's at educationevolution.org or on Spotify or wherever people like to download and stream.
Excellent. Us podcasters, we like to help other podcasters. So, and thank you so much for sharing your journey, your learning journey. We appreciate you being here on Disrupt Education.
Thank you for your hard work, Peter, and I can't wait to have you on my podcast.
Oh, I can't wait either. And thank you all for listening today. We'll catch you next time on Disrupt Education.